So this is a fascinating thing that's come up lately. Last week, maybe the week before, the 7th, Labour MP called Kim Ledbetter introduced a bill in Parliament advocating for a kind of graduate driving licence, a graduated driving licence, which is an attempt to introduce restrictions on driving for young people who have just passed their test and are also under 25, I believe the age is.
I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about licences issued to new drivers for the period of 6 months after the issuing of the licence, for the purpose of increasing safety for road users and for connected purposes.
I think there's something interesting that MPs do where they'll often pick a thing that is like they choose to be their thing, and it's always something that is fairly non-controversial. Local councillors do this as well, where local councillors will choose something like, I want to get a crossing installed in a certain place, or I want there to be like less dog poo, and it sort of allows them to come across as these like really hardened campaigners, whilst also picking something that is like, what if there was less road accidents? Which is good, but it would be nice sometimes if, they also picked something that was like slightly more capital P political.
It is a tragic and horrifying fact that in Great Britain in 2022 there were 29,742 individuals killed or seriously injured on our roads.
I'd be interested to know what the equivalent figures for public transport are. It's not something I've looked into particularly, but if there are arguments based on kind of like investing more in rail and in buses, not only as an efficiency measure, like environmental measure, not only as a kind of accessibility measure in terms of whether that can be cheaper for people and easier to get around, congestion, but also from a safety view. I would say that an attempt to reach 0 deaths on the road is unfortunately probably difficult. I think any attempt to introduce bills off the back of a tragedy is often really fraught and like complicated. In the aftermath of Brianna Ghey's death, her mother sort of came up with this bill that or sort of wanted to promote the idea that mobile phones should sort of be banned for under 16s, or that there should be, it's suggesting here, that maybe it's slightly more that there should be like particular restrictions on mobile phone use for under 16s, which I think sadly is a really complicated policy, and is probably not a workable one, just possibly like not the solution to any of the things that she's worried about. And this comes as someone who, I don't know, I sort of do have some concerns about the amount that people end up using mobile phones, but I don't necessarily know that banning them is the solution there. And I'm sure there is at least part of that is me slightly curmudgeoningly being like, why don't kids read books? But in the aftermath of kind of tragedies like this, or like car accidents taking place, it becomes this really complicated thing where I don't necessarily think there's always like a really devious motives happening. I just think sometimes in the heat of the moment isn't the time to maybe shape some of these policies. And maybe there'll be other occurrences where I would massively disagree. But yeah, it makes it really complicated to discuss, I do think.
The 18-year-old driver was racing 4 of his friends at night time on a rural road when they crashed into the car carrying Ian's 2 children.
So as I've said, the kind of policy that she's working towards talking about here is about under 25s who pass their test having like additional restrictions to how and when they can drive. Like the challenge is that that's already illegal. Like racing your friends on the roads over the speed limit is already illegal. That is potentially a real problem that needs some kind of intervention. But like, I don't know to what extent making it doubly illegal is the answer to that. And the angle of like the under 25s stuff, I'm not. I don't know. I mean, non-binary saying under 25 shouldn't have the ability to go faster than 40 miles per hour. I mean, the thing that has happened in Wales recently is that they've changed the kind of like default speed limit to be 20 miles per hour. But they've kind of introduced this on a kind of blanket basis that if there's not a specific speed limit around you, the default is 20 miles an hour. That is potentially a response to the same problem, a different intervention to the same challenge of road safety and of speeding in particular, which is the danger that is being brought up here. The difference is that this is applied to everyone, and there is this real, not odd shift, but certainly a shift in British politics at the moment, wherein restricting the abilities of young people, that seems to be a kind of go-to thing, which isn't to say that there aren't young people who, boy racers as they got called in the 90s, who go out and race cars around. The challenge is like, is this going to affect that more, right? Like, speeding is already illegal. Making it doubly illegal, I'm unsure whether that is going to make a difference or whether that's just going to affect young people who are more likely to abide by that law. You know, it's also entirely true that older drivers are also a problem. I don't know how the statistics work out, but I know over the last year I've had 2 incidents where I've been driving and there have been, you know, older drivers who have been engaging in like unsafe driving. Yeah, and so like there's no additional test in the UK if you are an older driver, which I think is a slightly wild scheme. Like, I passed my driving test at the age of 17, and I didn't really drive a huge amount for the best part of probably a decade after that. Me and my wife bought a car when we were like 27, 28, and I find it really odd that I was just allowed to go back and start driving again. But yeah, it fascinates me that that there's not some sort of test for old age in particular, but also like that there's no sort of top up ever. Like, I found that really weird. Yeah, as Hazard says, there'll be no test for older people because they vote. And yeah, I think like that is a big part of it. Non-binary says, as of recent data, there are approximately 5.7 million people aged 70 or over with a full driving license in the UK. This includes 489 centenarians. Worth saying that not all of those necessarily drive. Like, I remember my granddad had told like my mum and her siblings, and just been like, when I get to the age of 70, I'm going to stop driving. That was a pretty interesting way of doing it. I think he just sort of like told people, I'm going to stop driving when I'm 70, like however I feel about it then, whatever my capabilities are then, I'm just going to like set myself that limit that when I hit 70, which in the UK you get a free bus pass when you're 65, 66. So he was like, I'm just going to stop. And I think his thing was like, well, if I make the decision in advance, then I can't get to that age and go like, no, I think I'm fine.
Mr Deputy Speaker, this bill is not about taking away young people's freedom or fun. It's about trying to save their lives.
I do think it's worth saying that the kind of freedom point is important there, but also the idea that under 25-year-olds driving is fun is like a real misunderstanding of the fact that if you are 24, you are quite likely a grown-up with a job and like potentially a family, right? Someone who is 23, 24, 25 is not just driving for fun. Some of them are, maybe. Some of them like to put the roof down and feel the wind in their hair or whatever. But a lot of people who are 23, 24, 25 are driving because they live in a rural area and they have to drive somewhere to go to work, or they have a family and they need to drive. And they need to get their children to places. I don't think you would say that about middle-aged drivers, right? I don't think you would say to 40-year-olds, we're not looking to restrict your fun. I think the understanding of people under the age of 25 that this bill is based on is based on an understanding of people under 25 being that they're all kind of basically 16, and is part of a kind of broader infantilization of young people that I think we've seen in other places. So to add some context, so Odyssey's just asked, do you not have learner's permits? And yeah, so you get, so the way, sorry, I hadn't really thought to give much context to this. So for anyone watching that's not in the UK, basically you can apply for a learner driver license when you are 17. Provisional driver license, sorry, is what we is the phrase that we use, but that's what is in other countries sometimes called a learner's permit. And essentially that gives you the ability to drive as long as you have someone who has passed their proper driving test, and I think has to be over 25 as well. They're over the age of 21, sorry. Basically that allows you to practice driving with someone else who already knows how to drive. The idea in theory is that that person is a official approved driving instructor, but you can also go out and practice with a friend or family member who is over 21 who can like supervise you. You have to be insured on the car still, but that person kind of like assumes a certain amount of responsibility for your driving when they're with you as well. Then when you pass your full test, whenever you manage to do so, you get a full driving license, which is red, and you can use that to drive on your own. Just for full context, they look a little bit like this. So this one looks green. Yeah, this one's a provisional license. It's green. It's got a little L, which is we also use stickers of those on cars to signify. So if you have provisional license and you're driving, you have to have L plates on your car as well. This is a full driving license here if you've passed. There's also, I don't know how this compares to other countries, but there's also 2 tests in the UK. You do a theory test where you're kind of tested on, do you know what all the road signs mean? You have to do a hazard perception test, whereas some of this might have changed since I did it, but where they play you a video and and if you see a hazard, you have to like click the mouse. You have to answer like questions like, oh, if you're driving down a road and it's like residential and there's street lamps, like what speed limit is it probably? Yes, there are also P plates which some people use after they pass. P plates don't have any, so you can't drive with L plates if you've do L plates exist in other countries? And is this like is this like a ridiculous thing to be explaining? So you can't drive with these if you have a full license. Like that is illegal, or at least against the highway code. Whereas P plates, which are like just past plates, you basically have no law attached to them whatsoever. So here they go, the green ones. So you don't have to use them. And also, so when I hadn't driven for about 10 years and I started driving again, I briefly put P plates on the car because I was like, I'm feeling not super confident for a bit, and I'm going to put these on. I also think that there's something about the ways in which we like punish driving offences in this country is like really different to how we would punish anything else. Like life bans for driving are like pretty rare. So this is old data, but in 2018, there were 63,342 driving bans, but only 5 were lifetime bans. That's despite 157 people being convicted of causing death by dangerous driving. So you can drive dangerously to the point where you kill someone, and you can get like a X number of year ban. Oh wow. Sorry, so it says here 100 offenders convicted of causing death by dangerous driving had their ban duration recorded as until driving test passed. They just had to retake their test. I don't know where I sit on like what the solution to it is, but I do think it is interesting that we treat driving offences so differently. Like we treat killing someone by driving so differently to so many other things, right? Yeah, sorry, Matt making a really good point in the chat that the problem is that judges have to weigh up that a lifetime ban means that that person loses their job and possibly won't be able to work again. Like I think that's a really fair point that actually it's maybe not just taking away someone's ability to drive potentially isn't just taking away their ability to drive. There are all the extra things that exist around that, right? And do we get to the point where then the punishment becomes you don't get to live a life at all, and does that completely take away that person's ability to reintegrate themselves back into society? And like potentially it does, and I don't think that should be what the legal system is, right? In areas that are incredibly rural, like cars probably are going to be the way that people get around. Nevertheless, I think we give up too early in terms of some of our more urban areas. For the cities video, I was in Birmingham, which is the second biggest city in the country by population, and for some reason it seemed to all be designed around cars and driving in a way that seemed to make no sense whatsoever. So yes, we do definitely have bits of our country where we are far too reliant on cars. The design of the train system is also relatively London-centric. Like, we do have a system at the moment whereby getting public transport is practical and yet is not affordable.